Welcome to Behold. I'm Beth Whitney, and guess what? Craig's back. Hey, Craig.
Hello, everybody.
Craig, you've been on sabbatical for a couple months.
We've
missed you. I had to fly
Thank you.
solo.
You did, and you did so well, B. You
That's
did
very kind of you.
incredible, really great shows.
I
Really.
enjoyed it.
I watched all of them,
You were on sabbatical.
and I watched all of them. It's FOMO. You
I
fear
know.
missing out,
I know.
and stuff. And
They say
"Ah."
I'm the one with FOMO.
Well, it was, but they were great shows, really good shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. So-
What's one thing you want to share about sabbatical?
Well, you know me. I'm a reader.
Yes.
And so I read a ton of books while I was gone. One of the surprises that we had is that we had our son, daughter-in-law, and grandkids stay with us the entire time
Yes.
because they're renovating their house in the Bay Area. And that was just a plus. And so I would read in the mornings, the babies would get up, and then we'd spend almost all day in the pool. And which we loved. I know. It was, Papa, throw me kind of thing. And so that we loved that. And our son and daughter-in-law are great people. We love being with them too.
Well, also, little Mr. Silas popped into my office earlier today and told me the books of the Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation. I was so proud of him. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that was really
good.
fun. I know that that's something you guys worked on.
Yeah, we were working on that.
So I hear milkshakes are in order.
Milkshakes are in order. And I know that you were the same way. Speaking for those of us who have the privilege of having sabbaticals, it's such a gift.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we don't deserve. It's given to us by the church.
Yeah.
And if you belong to a different church than Arcade, I would highly encourage you to advocate for a sabbatical for your pastoral staff and leaders. Our life is just as stressful as anybody else's, but it's nice to be able to read and think and ponder without a deadline.
Yes.
Sunday's your deadline. Sunday's my deadline. And it's nice to be able to think about things without having to worry about producing them the next Sunday.
Yes, for sure.
Kind of thing. So that was great.
Well, I'm glad you're back.
Thank you.
Because today
Yeah.
we have a very special guest.
Very special.
Dr. Sandy Richter. If you've never heard of her, she's an author, a professor. She got her PhD from this place called Harvard.
It's a JC.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah, it's a JC out east.
It's like this brick building thing.
Yeah, whatever.
She is currently a professor at Westmont, which my family has connections to. And she is an Old Testament scholar and expert, I would say.
With a capital S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's brilliant, and she makes the Bible just come alive.
Yeah.
You might read through the Old Testament, and if you're doing a read through the Bible thing, sometimes there's parts of the Old Testament that are tough to get through. I think if I was reading through the Old Testament and Sandy was right there with me, I would have a different perspective.
Yeah. And she's published on that. And we'll talk about that in the show.
Yeah.
But, as we mentioned, she's a kind of scholar that after you've talked with her, you want to go back and reread the passage that she just gets through talking about. And you want us to talk about a passage today that is so interesting. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here we go. Hey, Sandy.
It is so good to be here. Thank you for this fine invitation.
Thank you for joining us. We see you are in beautiful Santa Barbara, suffering for the Lord.
Nobody cares.
I am. It's so true. And gosh, what is it? 300 days a year, or maybe 350, we have sunshine.
Yeah. And probably no 110 degrees.
Yeah, 110, 115. Yeah, that's about
Not even close. Yeah, if it gets to 80, people here start panicking.
Yeah. Well, Sandy, we are so excited to have you on the Behold podcast. I was telling Beth and before we started airing that you and I have a connection. We were speaking at camp about 3 years ago, right after COVID. And I'd never sat under your teaching prior to that. And you were talking about the Old Testament, which is your expertise. And it was just incredible, just amazing teaching. And I went out and bought your book after that, Epic of Eden. And I want to tell our viewers, if you're looking for a very good read of Old Testament survey, Epic of Eden would be the book to pick up. It is an excellent, excellent book. But that said,
thank you.
As good as you were at teaching The thing that I remember is your husband is, typical camp, you have a skit night, and there was a lot of cheesy skits by family members, all that kind of stuff. And your husband gets up, and apparently he can sing, and so he's going to sing. And I didn't know him that well at the time. He gets up there and he does what was the name of the song that he does? It's
oh my gosh, because
Baby, I didn't love
really
you
good. Yeah.
as long as I should have, that one. And he does dead on Willie Nelson and Elvis Presley. I gave him a standing ovation. It was amazing. Amazing. I love that. So tell him he's got mad props from me. I'll tell you that.
I will.
Yeah.
He actually started his professional life as a nightclub singer.
Oh.
Oh, wow. I can see why.
All sorts of crazy stories. He was literally a rock and roll star in New England.
Huh.
And when he became a Christian, nightclub singing wasn't quite, the vibe anymore.
Yeah.
So he went from being a nightclub superstar to enrolling in an 8 a.m. Greek class at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. Yeah. It's a pretty funny story.
Well, it was a lot of fun to relate to your family and stuff, and we really look forward to that. And we're so glad you're with us. Beth has been borderline weird all day long getting ready for this interview because
I don't know what you're talking about, Craig.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
I love the Word of God. I have probably over the last year or so gotten really excited about connecting Old Testament to New Testament. And then to have a woman scholar say yes to being on our podcast is thrilling. Mm-hmm. So anyway, speaking of women scholars, you're an Old Testament scholar.
I am.
At Westmont College, yeah.
Yeah, you're at Westmont, which my daughter and son-in-law are alumni of.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes. But what made you decide to go down the path of Old Testament?
It's actually a very convoluted story, so I'll keep it short, and you poke around, Tammy, if you want to, on further details. I actually started off in ministry, and even before that, let me say I was a late teen convert. I became a Christian during the Jesus movement in the Washington, D.C. suburbs, and I come from a pretty broken family story. So between my revivalist conversion and the fact that I didn't actually have parents, I had no life plan. No, literally none. And I wound up reading so randomly The Cross and the Switchblade. I don't even know. Yeah, I don't even know how I wound up with that book in my hands. I read the book. I was 17. I had no life plan. And the Holy Spirit just used it to grab my heart. And I was so profoundly convicted that whoever these people were, I had to find them and I had to help them. Mm-hmm. So I went to one of the leaders in my fellowship. I told her just that. I said, I can't sleep at night. What do I do? She said, oh, well, that's a call to ministry. And I said, oh, okay, what's that? And she said, well, it means you need to go to Bible college. And I said, oh, okay. What's that? And she knew of two. I applied, probably in crayon, and I found up at Valley Forge Christian College, which, unbeknownst to me, was an Assemblies of God Bible college. I spent my summers working in Teen Challenge in Philadelphia, the Women's Induction Center. So powerful, so formative. And by the time I was done, I'd kind of been assimilated into the denomination and I went into ministry. So I'm in ministry, working away, youth pastor, music pastor, educational pastor. But 20, 30 years ago, the Assemblies was not terribly friendly to women, especially if you were an outsider. And I was an outsider. And they also had a little trouble with higher education. And here's my profile. I'm good at academics. I'm a girl, and I'm an outsider. So as the
trifecta of rejection right there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as that relationship went on, I ran into a few barriers. We can talk about that more if you like. And meanwhile, I'm over at Gordon Conwell because now I'm working in Massachusetts trying to add to my education. So all of this stuff comes together. My senior pastor is like, wouldn't you like to get away from the pulpit? I'm like, no. And meanwhile, I'm getting this seminary education.
Mhm.
And so God just moved to all of those events to sort of direct me or redirect my calling toward the academy. And because my background from my undergraduate degree was almost exclusively New Testament, I had really focused on Old Testament to fill in the gaps.
Mhm.
And in that focus, I wound up with an educational interest in Old Testament. I fell in love with Old Testament, with Hebrew, with archaeology, with the grand context of the great story.
Mhm.
And before you know it, I was doing a PhD at Harvard in Hebrew Bible. So that's the
Wow.
short version.
That's great.
So you have a soon-to-be released Bible study that I was lucky to get a quick sneak peek of, and it is about Deborah from the book of Judges, and it is called Deborah, Unlikely Heroes in the Book of Judges. Why did you go with the title Unlikely Heroes?
Thank you for asking that question. Okay, so this business of the cultural setting of the Bible, the cultural setting of the Old Testament, this is one of my areas of expertise in my technical life. And because of that expertise, I am so deeply aware that Deborah should not culturally have been leading. This is
Yeah.
a very patriarchal, patrilocal, patrilineal society. So to have a woman step forward as commander in chief, judge, and prophet,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, is she stepping outside the cultural norms?
Mm.
And yet God is choosing her, empowering her, and pushing her forward into this role of leadership. Deborah leads for over 40 years. So Deborah is our first unlikely leader. Then we have Barak, who is a clan commander of the tribe of Naphtali. Now, Naphtali is a great name. Man, you know, if I had another kid, I might use it. But it is not one of the major tribes. It is not Judah. It is not Reuben. It's not Manasseh or Ephraim. And yet Barak is called forward to be the captain of her military forces. And the battle that they're called into is one that they cannot win.
Mhm.
So again, we have an unlikely leader. And then the most unlikely leader of all in this grand narrative is Jael. And who would expect a stay-at-home mom who's a farmer's wife, actually a pastoralist wife, to step forward and deal the death blow to the warlord of the Canaanites?
Yeah.
So we have this narrative that seems to be consumed with unlikely leaders.
Mhm.
And when we take that narrative forward as a story that matters, to quote Sam Gamgee on the side of Mount Doom, and apply it to the New Testament story, what I want my listeners to hear over and over again is that God is in the business of choosing, promoting, empowering, and confirming unlikely leaders. It's what he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just I spoke at our college group on Monday night and I talked about Peter and I was like, Jesus said, on this rock I will build my church. And we
Mhm.
kind of went through Peter's foolishness, we'll just say, before the Holy Spirit, and talk about an unlikely
Yeah.
hero, right?
Yeah.
You can just over and over and over and over again. There's only one hero in
Yeah.
the Bible. Everyone else is like A for effort, but
What is, Sandy, what is your take? And this is coming out of coming sideways a little bit. Whenever in a patriarchal society,
Mm.
like even the one that we currently live in to some extent,
Mhm.
there is always this comparison of Deborah's strength and Barak's weakness.
Mm.
Because I'm not going to go to battle unless you go with us, and that's perceived as weakness. Is that even from a Hebraic standpoint, but also from a scholar standpoint, is that what the story tells us, is how weak Barak was and how strong Deborah was? There's no doubt Deborah was strong to be able to judge for 40 years.
Yes.
There was a strength about her that was God-given. But do we leap to the weakness then of Barak simply because he was a man? And
sorry, I'm jumping in because that narrative drives me crazy.
Yeah.
This portraying of Barak as weak or as cowardly is such a result of 21st century gender bias.
Yeah.
That, again, it makes me crazy. So let me clarify. Deborah, like Samuel, is identified as not only judge, but prophet. Deborah, like Moses, is presented as commander-in-chief, but not warrior on the field.
Mm-hmm.
This is not an unusual scenario. And can I say that in the relationship between Moses and Joshua, Moses is the one who commands the troops, and Joshua is the one who gets down on the battlefield and gets bloody fulfilling
It's a great response.
those troops.
I love that. Yeah.
Yes. And as we know, in the battle against the Amalekites, it's a famous story, Joshua asks Moses to get himself up on a hill so that the troops can see the prophet of God. Because the men on the field know that if Yahweh's behind them, they can't lose. Who is the representative of Yahweh's approval and affirmation? It's the prophet. Yeah. So Moses gets up on a hill. He raises his arms, which is an ancient Near Eastern iconic gesture of we are winning. You hear that phrase throughout the Exodus. Yahweh delivered Israel with an extended right arm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Moses is up there with his arms raised. It's a long battle. He gets exhausted. And so they put a rock under him for him to sit, remember? And Aaron and Hur hold up his arms. Now, in that scenario, the fact that Joshua asks the prophet to be with him in the battle, we would never in a bajillion years characterize Joshua as a coward.
Right.
When Saul asks Samuel to be present, when David asks Samuel to be present, we would never caricature those kings as cowards. Rather, we would recognize their devotion to the Almighty and their recognition that the battle belongs to the Lord. So I need the prophet with me.
Yeah.
That's all that's happening between Barak and Deborah. He, as a faithful man of God, is saying, okay, first of all, this is a big one. And it is.
Yeah.
The battle for the Jezreel is a huge strategic win for the tribes of Israel to get the Jezreel Valley back. And that's what Deborah's great story is. It's a huge win. It is militarily impossible. Mm-hmm. It's impossible. And I go through all the details of the military strategy in the study. Jabin has claimed Hatzor. His warlord is Sisera down in Megiddo. He has 900 chariots fitted with iron and a fully professional army. Our team has a volunteer conscript army, in other words, draft, coming from the tribes, farmers who are beating their plowshares into weapons. Mm-hmm. And Barak is looking at this battle plan and he's saying, okay, the Lord has spoken. Deborah, I'm your man. But what you're asking of me, we're all going to die. We're all going to die.
Yeah.
So you come with me so that the men of Naphtali and Zebulun will see that the prophet is with me. And you speak the word when it's time to charge. And in obedience to Yahweh, we will charge. And we will have confidence in the Lord. But this one is out of our reach. There is nothing cowardly about that response. Instead, what we see is a man of tremendous faith and commitment.
That's great. I've never heard it that way before. I love that. I really appreciate that because that, as you already articulated, that seems to be what the conclusion that everybody has is that, oh, look how weak Barak was and how strong Deborah was. And that's great.
And as we look at the word, the passage where that cowardice is supposedly tagged is in chapter 4, where Barak says, okay, I'll do this. I'm outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, outplanned. I'll do this. Yes, ma'am. But I need the prophet to come with me.
Mhm.
And Deborah says, of course, I will go with you. Of course, I will go with you. That's the literal translation in the Hebrew. But she goes on to say, but you need to know, Barak, that the glory for this battle is not going to go to you. It's going to go to a woman. What does she mean by that? Well, the assumption of that diminishing interpretation of Barak is that the glory is going to go to Deborah. That Deborah, our unlikely leader, is the one who's claiming the day. Well, that, first of all, is wrong.
Mhm.
The glory is going to go to Jael. Yeah, the total definition of a nobody who's hanging out in her Bedouin pastoralist tent by the southern shores of the Galilee and is going to wind up completely unexpectedly with a warlord sleeping under a blanket in the woman's tent. Okay, so it's not going to Deborah, it's actually going to Jael. And where is that glory thing coming from? Well, Lawson Stone, a past colleague of mine, is an expert on the book of Judges, and he talks about how in these warrior-based cultures, and that's what the era of Judges is, that the great honor is dealing the death blow to your counterparts in the other army. So think David running out on the field of battle, jumping up on Goliath's chest, grabbing his sword and cutting off Goliath's head. That's the moment of great glory. So what is Deborah saying? She's saying, you need to know, though, Barak, you will not be dealing the death blow to Sisera. That's going to someone who's not going to appear until we get to the end of the story.
Yeah. Out of the blue.
Totally out of the blue.
Yeah.
Well, and if anyone's a coward in the story, I see Sisera as he's running away to a women's tent, right?
Yeah.
Who's the coward? Who's the coward? It's Sisera.
Yeah, and who abandons his troops on the field of battle?
Yeah.
Who lets his team walk into a slaughter?
Yep.
Whereas Barak has got 10,000 men on the backside of Mount Tabor. He's betrayed by Heber the Kenite, so he doesn't even get that element of surprise. He turns to Deborah. His men are panicking, and she says, now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he's like, yes, ma'am.
Let's do it.
And let's do it. And I can tell you, and again, we'll talk about the strategy in the study. Barak's forces are infantrymen. They're a volunteer army. They are armed for man-to-man combat. And if you study military strategy, there's man-to-man combat, there's intermediate distance, and there's long-distance weaponry. Sisera, on the other hand, has got a professional army that is armed for all three levels of combat.
Wow.
And they are riding on 900 chariots. And in the ancient world, a chariot is the nuclear arsenal. They are mobile military units. And what that means is they're the equivalent. A chariot in the ancient world is equivalent to a tank in our world.
Okay.
And what happens when 900 tanks come against an army of infantrymen?
It would just mow them down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's an absolute slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the men of Naphtali, because of the confidence they have in Barak, and because of Barak's confidence in Deborah, they charge.
Yeah.
They charge. And all I can see on top of every great battle scene I've ever pictured, I see goodness. I see Aragorn outside the gates of Mordor. I see Theoden launching the Rohirrim at the Battle of Gondor. And I see William Wallace on the hill, the Highlands of Scotland, saying, we ride to death because, as I say over and over again in the curriculum, there's some things that are worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm just impressed that you're using Lord of the Rings imagery because my sister to my right has never seen it. I question her Christianing. I really do.
Oh my gosh.
I tell you, I don't understand.
I don't know.
But you are my kindred spirit when it comes to Lord of the Rings.
Maybe now.
Now. Yeah. Now you can do it.
Have you seen Wonder Woman and the Amazons in the first 15 minutes of that film?
Yes.
Okay. Do you love it right there with me?
Yes.
When a 51-year-old Robin Wright has triceps that we would all die for.
Yeah, and none of us have time for those triceps.
I know. And
Sorry, Craig, but it's true.
And when
I just checked out.
When she comes sprinting across the field and yells, "Shield!"
Yeah.
At some point in my life, I'm going to do that. And then she launches into the air.
Can you give us advance notice of that? Because I think I'd pay money to see that. You know,
maybe it's Spring Sing.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, you do know Westmont, don't you?
I do know Westmont.
The only problem is right now I would yell "Shield." I would jog over
right,
and I might get 6 inches in the air. Old age stinks.
I hear ya.
Yep.
Okay. Wow. This has been amazing so far.
Great. Yeah.
So Deborah is nestled in the book of Judges, kind of in the beginning.
Yep.
So what mindset should we have as we approach the book of Judges?
Oh my gosh. It is one of the darkest books in the entire Old Testament. In fact, if in your audience you have got a mom or dad of teenagers who's desperately trying to engage a 15-year-old boy in the Bible, read the book of Judges.
Amen.
Boom.
That's right.
Boom. Right there. It's full of unlikely heroes.
Mm-hmm.
It's full of Wild West heroes where the good guys and the bad guys are like 3 inches apart, you know? Is the gunslinger actually going to be a good guy today or a bad guy today?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, oh my gosh, bloody, messy, all that sort of thing. So as we approach the book of Judges, there are a couple of things I would want the audience to know. One, it's dark. Do not expect a Disney flick as you step in. Two, it details the settlement era of Israel's history. So it's what I call liminal space. I'm going to pause right there. Can you hear the noises in the backyard next? Were you okay?
No.
It's not that bad.
Shaking his head.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The leaf blowers left this morning, but the kids have come out to play. Okay. So what do I mean by liminal space? Liminal is the space in between, and it's in between two stable governments, to put it loosely. The first is Moses in the wilderness with the 12 tribes, and under his iconic authority, the tribes are solid, right? They're generally doing what they're told, and when they don't, he wrestles them back into control. The next place of stability is going to be the monarchy. Especially under David, we're going to establish the boundaries, and under his iconic leadership, we're going to have stability. In between is chaos. And wild and woolly, Wild West, frontierism, all those words apply. So in that anthropological, historical space, we can expect some of the just crazy stories of the book of Judges, assassins and people killing folks with the jawbone of a donkey, Samson, Abimelech, wild stories. So that's one thing I want you to know. The other thing I would want an audience to know is that there are 12 cycles in this book. The book is very structured. The 12 cycles are all staged around 12 selected judges. Were there only 12 judges in Israel's story? No, there were probably many more. But as we've kind of noticed, 12 is a stylized number.
Yeah.
So we got 12 stories. And in each of these cycles, the people of God do the exact same thing. They start off in obedience because the judge lives. And the judge serves as kind of a Supreme Court justice and keeps them in line. The judge dies. The people start drifting. When they start drifting, they start falling into disobedience, specifically following after other gods. With following after other gods, as the Mosaic covenant promised, they wind up being disciplined by foreign oppression. The foreign oppression wakes them up. They're like, oh my gosh, we've strayed from the covenant. They start calling out for deliverance, and God sends another judge who accomplishes a great military victory, and we wind up in that safe space again. 12 times they go through this cycle. 12 times, you and I reading the book are like, oh my gosh, when are they going to figure out that disobedience causes national insecurity? And this isn't a good plan. And then we look at ourselves in the mirror and we say, I wonder when I'm going to figure that out. 12 cycles. Okay, so not only do we have the 12, but if you're watching my hand signals, we also have this cycle going on. So that by the time we get to the end of the book of Judges and the story of Judges 19 and the Levite and the gang rape of his concubine, we are sick to our stomachs.
Yeah.
And we, like the narrator, take a look at the people of God and we say, the people of God have not only assimilated into the culture of the Canaanites, they are now worse than the Canaanites. And how in the world are we going to clean up this mess? So that would be the other big thing I would want folks to know about the book of Judges. So we have the temporary deliverance of the judges themselves, but the ultimate deliverance of every man did what was right in his own eyes is going to be the emergence of the monarchy under David. So those are some structuring ideas.
Yeah. Now, you've got the Epic of Deborah. Is this an ongoing series that you plan on doing through Judges, or are you going to keep that epic theme and do other aspects of the Old Testament?
Yeah, so we've got about 7 studies in the series at this point. The first one is my overview of the Old Testament, which is a very accessible version of the book, The Epic of Eden, a Christian entry into the Old Testament.
It's in Bible study format?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
And it was the very first one we filmed. Seabed is the champion of that particular publication. We are planning, if all things go well, to refilm it with a second edition of it in December and then re-release it. We're working on that. The contracts are not yet signed. Then there is one on Isaiah, on Ruth, on Jonah, Deborah, and Psalms. Yeah, and I might be missing one. So, we've got a bunch of them out there. And what the audience keeps asking me for is a study on the in-between period. In other words, take us from the collapse of the kingdom to the emergence of the New Testament.
Yeah, we did a couple of shows on that.
We did,
that would be really great. That would be really good. We'd enjoy that. Yeah,
for sure.
A lot of folks really struggle with that era of biblical history, especially Christians. It's interesting because the Jewish scholars I studied with, especially at Harvard, they were almost all what we call Second Temple. They started their studies with the exile, whereas most Christians kind of shut down with the beginning of the exile.
We pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right? It's that page that says New Testament from Malachi to Matthew. And so nothing important must have happened.
Right. Turn the page.
Right.
It definitely wasn't silent, that's for sure. No, that'll be good. That would be good.
So we've kind of already talked about this with your question about a weak Barak and a strong Deborah. But I know there are a lot more misconceptions or misperceptions about the life of Deborah. Can you tell us kind of the common ones or the ones that pop up and tend to frustrate you?
Yeah. So let's get back to that structuring idea, right? We've got 12 cycles presented in the book of Judges. And again, we're not saying that's exhaustive. There were probably many more judges, and some of those judges are leading different regions of the country at the same time. So we've just got these 12 representative stories that are supposed to help us as the reader understand the book of Judges theologically and historically as well. Okay, so where does Deborah fall in that cycle? Well, she's number 4. Think about our biblical stylized numbers, yeah? We've got 3, 7, 10, 12, 40. We got no 4. There's no 4, which tells us that our biblical narrator they're not dropping her in one of the hot spot slots. She's not an affirmative action hire, is what I'm trying to say. She's just number 4. And in number 4, one of the things we see happening with the cycle of the book of Judges is that the first 4 or 5 judges are really stable, exemplary judges. We've got Othniel and Ehud and Shamgar and Deborah. Yeah. After Deborah, things start siphoning down.
Mm-hmm.
So her position tells us she's very well respected. The fact that she is one of 2 and only 2 judges to also receive the iconic title prophet, which is the most powerful office in Israel's theocracy. Think about the story of Nathan and David and Bathsheba.
Yeah.
Who's holding the upper hand in that confrontation? And the answer is Nathan.
Mm-hmm.
And can I also say that for a prophet to step into the throne room of a king in the ancient world and to call him out in front of his enlisted men, that prophet would have died where he stood.
Yeah.
And instead, Nathan bows the knee. So what we have with Deborah is both prophet and judge. The only parallel is Samuel. She is the Margaret Thatcher of the ancient world.
Mm.
So for us to start writing her off as an anomaly, as an affirmative action hire, as an exception, because there were no men available to lead, the woman leads for more than 40 years. That is a very long anomaly.
Yeah.
But there are scholars out there that are so committed to a 21st century agenda that women cannot lead, that they work very, very hard to undermine her.
And I'm really glad you pointed that out, because I was taught that. I was taught that, well, the reason why Deborah was the top is because all the men were weak.
Yeah.
And that diminishes Deborah.
Yes.
In a lot of different ways. But no, the fact is that there were capable people, but God called Deborah because God called Deborah.
Yes.
And he called her to be a prophet and a judge, and she ruled well. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah.
Commander-in-Chief.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So some of the details I'll pull out in the story. When she summons Barak, and I use the word summon, a lot of the translations will have call. No, she summons him across enemy lines. The man travels more than 70 miles to bow the knee at the palm tree of Deborah.
Wow.
I have read articles where supposedly the palm tree communicates that she's not exercising her legislative authority in public. And one of the things I'll rehearse in the study is how many times in the Old Testament we have various heroes, from Abraham to Jacob to Samuel, identify where they will meet the troops by a tree. Mm-hmm. Because there aren't that many trees in the land of Israel. And the trees are huge, and the shade makes a huge difference. So Barak comes across enemy lines. He responds wholeheartedly to her commands. He summons more than 10,000 men based on her orders. And it is her war oracle that inspires the tribes to fight. When we get to the epic poem of chapter 5, because the story of Deborah is given to us in prose, chapter 4, and then in this beautiful epic poem, which is likely one of the oldest pieces of literature in our Old Testament. That's Frank Cross. In the epic poem, she and he are celebrated as courageous superheroes.
Oh, yeah.
That bring the tribes to focus their efforts on this hugely strategic battle that wins back not only the breadbasket of ancient Israel, the Jezreel Valley, but it takes back the trade routes.
Okay.
And this is a real functioning society, guys. These are, as I tell my students all the time, real people. They lived in real places. They had a real economy. They had a real army. If you don't hold the trade routes, you don't have an economy. And by the time we reach Deborah's story, the Jezreel has not only been taken over by the Canaanites, But the Israelites who should own those farms have been conscripted as slave labor to service those farms under the abusive authority of Sisera and Jabin. And when Sisera hears that Barak has gathered his 10,000 and is going to try to fight back, Sisera doesn't send an equal contingent. He sends his entire army and his entire chariot force. In other words, what Sisera is going to do is he is going to crush Barak
annihilate
and the tribes. Yeah. In order to convince them, you will never rise again. Don't even try it, dude. And yet our team winds up winning. It's an awesome story.
The battle belongs to the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Did you just quote Petra?
I quoted you from Good Friday.
Oh, okay.
You're welcome.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe a little Petra.
Yeah, right.
Beth, say that again, because
the battle belongs to the Lord.
Yeah.
Yes.
Over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
Over
right.
again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again through this curriculum. One of the things I do, and I pull in Chris Wright and Lawson Stone and Gerhard von Rad and point to our New Testament community that these stories are in the Bible for a reason. And they're in the Bible for the reason is that they would shape and disciple and transform us. So what happens in this story is that Deborah and Barak look out over the Jezreel Valley and they see territory that should be in the hands of the people of God. That's the first thing. They see it. That belongs to the people of God.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're willing to step forward and fight for it. So those are the questions I ask over and over. What territory can you see from where you're standing that you know belongs to the people of God, but is not yet in the hands of the people of God? Is question 2, is it worth fighting for? And question 3, what are you going to do about it?
Wow.
Well, that's too convicting. So, we want to move on from that.
Yeah.
Oh, Sandy, I tell you, the kind of Bible teacher I want to be, and I know Beth well enough, the kind of Bible teacher she wants to be, is the kind of stuff that you brought us. When I'm done talking to a Bible teacher and they don't make me want to read my Bible more, I probably don't listen to them again. And that was one of the things that I saw in you at that camp 3 years ago, and even in this conversation today. You make me want to read my Bible more, and I'm very grateful for that. I really love that. I appreciate it very much, and I hope our people can do that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That is such a high compliment. Thank you very, very much, Greg.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
How does the story of Deborah point to Jesus?
Well, in our pre-conference chatting, which, by the way, all of you listeners, these are awesome people. I hope you listen to them every day. Okay. In our pre-podcast chat, Beth asked me, can we see in the actions of Jael perhaps an echo of the prophecy given to Eve, that the woman will crush the serpent's head? And I've read that a few times, but I honestly have not connected those dots. So I want to throw that back at you, Beth. Why did you ask that question?
It always, you hear the story as a child, or I grew up in the church, Sunday school stories, but reading the Bible as an adult and coming to the understanding that everything, every theme, every story, every character points to Jesus, and then trying to figure out how, right? So I'm reading this story, and Jael, who really shouldn't be a part of the story, puts a tent peg through this. You keep calling him a warlord, and I'm thinking of how evil a warlord is, right? She puts a tent peg through his head, and I can't help but, I can't help but, hearken back to, by the woman's heel, I'm going to say it wrong. The serpent will be crushed by the woman's heel, right?
The offspring of the woman.
Thank you.
He will crush.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to say it wrong. And so thinking of that and okay, is that a foreshadowing to what Jesus was going to do to Satan?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I love that too. And Beth, you're a mom as well.
Mm-hmm.
Every story whispers his name.
Yeah.
That my favorite children's Bible ever.
Yes.
So let's just talk about JL for a minute.
Okay.
And hopefully we have time for this. One of the things I love about her being in the story is she is the definition of a nobody. Mm-hmm. Israel at this point, they're farmers, they're agriculturalists, and she's a pastoralist. So she is culturally on the outside. Heber the Kenite, her husband, is related by allegiance to Moses' in-laws, but they're not actually Israelites. So again, she's on the outside. Mm-hmm. Heber has proven himself a turncoat. He has betrayed Barak and Barak's position. So now he's a liar and a thief on top of that. And yet Jael, his wife, in a patriarchal world, is a patriot. And she's remembering the loyalty of her people to Moses' people. And she is going to actually undermine her husband's betrayal of the Israelites, and she's going to fight for the Israelites. Okay. The courage that is represented there just...
it's off the charts. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then, as someone pointed out when I was test driving this curriculum, which means I teach it in a bunch of churches and they tell me everything I did wrong so that when I actually publish it, it's fairly clean.
Yeah, we call that Sunday here. So
I had this woman stand up and during Q&A, and this had never occurred to me. She said, what I see in this story is Deborah in her power suit, a working mom, and Jael in her capris and baby throw up stained t-shirt at home are using the tools at their disposal to defeat the enemy of the kingdom and expand the footprint of the kingdom.
Wow.
I was like, I love that.
Yeah.
And then in one of these conversations, I had, and I'll tell the story in the curriculum, I had a brain surgeon operating room nurse. Actually, she was orthopedic as well. I'm mixing up the details at this point. Oh, well, she stands in the operating room on a daily basis while the doctor saws through skulls. And as we were standing in this little after-session barbecue in one of the church members' backyard, all of us in our little sundresses and strappy sandals, right? I'm looking at this woman. We're in Texas, so it's, sundress. She has got bigger biceps than Robin Wright in Wonder Woman. And I'm like, girl, what are you doing? And she's like, I don't do anything. I just work in an operating room.
Wow.
And she went on to tell me that trying to penetrate the human skull with a 10-peg is really serious business. And that JL, it was so much fun. She's like, okay, she might have gone through the temple. She might have gone through the eye socket. This is like, over ribs and hamburgers, right? Yeah. She said, but the best shot would have been through the mouth. Okay. So that's crazy.
This is awesome.
The point of this is that the tools that JL is using are the tools that every pastoralist housewife uses every day. So one of my illusions is, and Craig, I don't know if you're going to follow this, Tangled. Yeah.
Yes. My favorite Disney movie.
Yeah.
The frying pan.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Domestic tool to wipe out a warrior. Go JL.
I love that. It's probably not something we're going to see on The Chosen, but still, it's going to be good. So, yeah. I love that.
You can do your Old Testament Chosen.
Yeah, there you go. That's right.
I'll work on my biceps so I can be in it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. My garage workout is not producing those kind of results. What can I say?
Well, hey, Sandy, thank you so much for being a part of our Behold podcast, for sharing your study and work in the book of Judges, especially Deborah, and just your knowledge and expertise with the people who will listen to it. We hope you enjoyed your time with us. But again, thank you.
We love it. Hey, when is the Epic of Deborah? Is it out now?
It's dropping on August 27th.
Okay.
So HarperCollins, Seedbed, they're both doing just so much good work trying to get it out there.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we're hoping to. Yeah, I hope it.
Well, it's gonna bless a lot of people, Sandy. It really is. So just as it has just in this conversation with us, we're very grateful.
Oh, I love being with you guys. Thank you so much for your interest in my work, and thank you for the ministry that you bring to the people of God. Keep it up.
You too, Sandy.
You too. All right.
Thank you. Have a good school year.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, Craig, it's been a while.
It has.
And I've missed you. I've had to do the beholding solo.
And you did. You were amazing, B.
Okay.
You really were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You were.
I appreciate your kind words. I learned that from you. It's such a good way to receive compliments, because you don't have to deflect or act like you don't care, because compliments feel good.
They do.
So thank you for your kind words. And honestly, your kind words mean a lot to me, because we're good friends. I respect you, all of that.
We've seen a lot of ministry together. That's for sure.
We have.
Yeah.
So after our conversation with Sandy, let's behold the Lord.
Yeah. I mean, how many, I was just thinking about this as you're talking, how many Old Testament scholars do we know that after having a conversation with them, they incite you to worship? And I think that's the kind of Bible teachers we want to be.
Yes.
We want to be the kind of Bible teachers, like I was saying earlier, that when we're done, we want people to read their Bibles more. We want them to draw near to God more, to
love
worship
Jesus
God,
more.
love Jesus. And this is like the third or fourth conversation and teaching that I've received from Sandy, and every single time it's that way.
Yeah.
And so as she was talking, I was thinking about Psalm 91.
Yeah.
And I can even maybe hear Deborah and Barak saying something like this as they were going against this 900 iron chariot.
Yeah. Good luck, buddy. Kind of army. Yeah.
And this is what the psalmist says in Psalm 91, verse 1 through, 4 or 5, something like that. The one who lives under the protection of the Most High dwells in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say concerning the Lord, who is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust, he himself will rescue you from the bird trap, from the destructive plague. I can insert here from 900 chariots.
Yep.
He will cover you with his feathers. You will take refuge under his wings. His faithfulness will be a protective shield. And this probably wasn't penned at the time of Deborah and Barak, but it can absolutely be applied to their situation. But it can be applied to our situation as well, is that we have this God who protects us and secures for us, and his seal is upon us, according to Ephesians 1. And so we can be able to be free and worship him and know that he is protecting us like a hen protects the chicks.
His faithfulness is a protective shield. What a beautiful picture that we might think, oh, we have to be out there ourselves. No, God's faithfulness is what protects us from ourselves, but also from the darts of the enemy, right?
Yeah, because even as Sandy was talking about these 12 cycles of debauchery, 12 cycles of evil, we also see 12 cycles of God's grace and God's protection. And
those are only the 12 recorded cycles, right?
Exactly.
We assume that there's probably
more
time gaps, so I'm sure there's more than 12. Yeah, God is good and faithful and kind and loving and full of grace. And if you don't know him yet, we would love to talk to you, because let me introduce you to my king. I would love the honor of doing that. But, well, Craig, again, so great to have you back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Yeah, it really is.
All right. So you know what to do. Like, share, comment, rate. What else can they do?
Well, I would even say, Mom and Dad, I think you need to listen to this show with your kids.
Yeah.
Because Dr. Richter puts the cookies on the bottom shelf for us. And I think it'd be a great, great show to have your kids listen to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Until next time.
See ya.
Take care.